And welcome back to the Catholic Convert Show. It is Monday, the best day of the week, May 6th, 2024. And of course, I'm back with the resident soprano actor,
With me.
Ed. What's going on, brother? How you doing?
That's right. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Made it through another weekend. Weather here up in Jersey was kind of lousy, but you know, I'll take it. It's still kind of cold and clammy out there today, but we'll live through it somehow.
Yeah, the weather out here hasn't been too bad. It's been kind of rainy, but not to the point where it's like a downpour or any consistent rain for more than 5 minutes. But for the most part, it's just been that really warm, sticky, humid thing, which did make for a terrible weekend. And it created some awkward situations between me and my neighbor. Um, you know, I don't know if you've ever spent like any time in like the spring or summer in the deep south where I live, but there's weeks that go by where you don't get so much as a slight breeze, and it's just muggy, and you've got mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds, and it's just terrible. Well, prior to spring starting, we had a lot of just heavy rain that would last days and days and days. But what that led to, because I live in this tiny little town of 800 people, was a lot of people's septic systems just filling up and not able to, drain into their leach fields, right? Because where I lived, if you're on if you're on sewer, it's because your house was built post 1980, and my house was built in 1941. Uh, Same as most of the places that are on my street. And my neighbor was having their septic tank pumped, and they're not exactly close, right? But they're far enough away I can see their house, and I see the big septic truck going down the street. And that day, of all days, was the day that we had a breeze, and I was downwind. So I'm outside. I'm trying to like feed my chickens. I'm trying to feed my ducks, and taking the dog out. And it's absolutely horrible. And so my neighbor's standing out on his porch, and he knows the breeze is blowing towards me. We kind of make eye contact for a minute, and I can't help it. I'm secretly judging the guy. I'm like, "What is wrong with you? What is wrong with your family? Like, this, this cannot continue." Like, I it was a very awkward moment when we locked eyes, and he knew that I knew, and he knew that I was judging him. So, but other than that, it was a great weekend.
Good. Good.
That was Saturday, and then
Uh-huh.
Sunday the breeze was gone, but thankfully so were the septic trucks. And went to mass and had a nice dinner with the family afterwards.
Well, that's very nice. Yeah, those breezes they can be dangerous. Reminds me of the time I was down in West Virginia visiting my brother a few years back, and the hotel we stayed at was right next to a pig farm. And this was in August, and the wind had shifted direction. And so for the 3 days we were staying in a hotel, that pig farm scent was coming right into our rooms. Uh, you familiar with you familiar with you're from South Carolina? You familiar with the smell of pig farms? It's not a nice one.
No,
It's
no,
worse than
not
the
so much
septic, I think.
pigs, but yeah, but when I lived out west, we would have to drive through on the way into El Paso coming from New Mexico. We would drive through uh, this huge dairy farm that was out there, and every time you drove by, there's this giant mountain of cow crap that they would be loading up into dump trucks to haul off. And tell you what, the New Mexican desert, right, is like at the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert. It's like 112 degrees. That is a fantastic smell to drive by a dairy farm. When you've got
Yeah,
this
I'd
mountain of
imagine.
manure that's twice the size of any house you've ever lived in. When they're
Yeah.
using excavators and earth movers to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's
So
absolutely
so
terrible.
And of course, everyone tuned in today hoping we would be discussing manure for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Now I was looking over the Dignitas Infinita, and one of the things that I saw when it first came out, and for those of you listening who have no idea what I'm talking about, it is the document that Pope Francis released a few weeks ago now, in which he expressed the Catholic Church's views on the condition of human dignity. But one of the things that I saw it, like I said, but I glossed over it was his global his call for a global ban on surrogacy, and it's not something that has ever been at the forefront of my mind. We all know I'm fertile enough. I've got 9 kids. Never had the need to scout a surrogate, and uh, it's I don't think I know anyone that's ever used a surrogate. But when I read through the document in the section of the Dignitas Infinita, the reasoning for the call to ban surrogacy was ultimately twofold. It was one, it turns a child into a commodity in which it's something that can be created and you know essentially traded or purchased for a price. And second, it violates the admission that God's plan for you isn't to be undermined. Right? It's the same thing that he stood on the sex change operation. You were made as what you are, and that's the way it's intended. If you were made infertile, then that is also intended. Now, yes, there's adoption, but that is that is charity. That is taking in another existing human being that needs a loving home. It is not, let's pay someone a fee to artificially, uh, be impregnated with this human life, and then we get it. It does essentially boil down to a financial transaction for a child. And I started thinking about it, and I've never thought about it before. It's not something that, like I said, has ever been on the forefront of my mind. I've never needed a surrogate. Um, Again, 9 children, but I do know some people that struggled for years to conceive a child, and I know people that went the IVF route, and I know people that did. It wasn't IVF, but it was like a hormonal therapy treatment kind of thing, and some medical intervention that helped them fix an issue where they could still conceive naturally. It wasn't in vitro or anything like that. And so I know people have struggled with it, and I've seen firsthand because my wife and I we've lost 2 children uh, of the pain that comes with that, and so I can only partially imagine the pain that would come with someone being told they cannot conceive, right? Because you're a dad, I'm a dad. I can't even imagine what life would be like without my kids. So, in a sense, I get why that particular thing is starting to get a lot of pushback from people, especially in the LGBTQ community. You have a lot of same sex relationships where they're going and finding a donor and a surrogate, and now we have a kid of our own. Well, half kid of our own if it's 2 men, half kid of our own if it's 2 women. But it still boils down to you paid for a child. You paid for a child to be created, and you paid for possession of that child. Um, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because uh, there's hardly anything that I hear come out of the Vatican that I don't immediately go, "Do I agree with this?" You know? But when I read this was something like makes 100% total sense, right? And I was completely on board as soon as I read it. I'm like, makes sense. Let's global ban on surrogacy. Children are not commodities.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree 100% on that. And for the specific reason that you're citing there, that it does turn children into something that can be bought and sold, that can be bartered for, traded for. And that certainly to me seems to fly in the face of God's purpose for us. And I think the issue we have, because people will fight back when you say something like that. They'll say, well, here's a couple that could not conceive, could not otherwise have a baby for whatever reason it is. And you're missing the point that they now have a child together. And isn't that beautiful? A family has been created. But I think this is the issue that we run into with a lot of things that we face in society, where it's kind of the ends justifies the means. And I would disagree with that. You know, the ends don't justify the means. You can't say, well, it doesn't matter how it happened. Now there's a family that's been created. You have to go back to how that family was created. And and again, you cannot use the life of a child as a commodity. And you know, people and people say, well, they wouldn't have children otherwise. And I think you mentioned um, adoption earlier, or maybe I was just thinking about it, but um, that's certainly an option. And here is a child that was created, that exists already, and you would be doing a good thing and a holy thing by bringing them into your house. Um, but having designer children, no, that's something completely different. And people say, well, it's very unfair that this couple, for whatever reason that might be, cannot have children of their own. And I say, well, I don't remember ever being promised a fair life. I don't remember ever being promised a life where everything would go well. And I would use as the example, um, a couple is young, they're in love, and they get married, and unfortunately, there's some sort of an accident, some sort of an illness, which now um, renders one of the members of the couple um, in a state where having intimacy is not going to happen. It can't happen. It's not possible. So, by looking at that ends justify the means kind of thing, someone might say, well, it's okay then for their partner, since they didn't expect this, they weren't prepared for that. It's okay for them to find that physical comfort elsewhere because it's not their fault that life threw them this curveball. Oh no, it's not their fault. But you made a promise, you took vows, you're going to love and cherish this person forever, regardless of what goes on. So to change the script because you're infertile, to change the script because you can't have intimacy with the person. I mean, you can create a long list of things that may change in your lifetime. It doesn't change, what we know to be true, um, as far as God's plan for us. And sometimes life is going to really screw you up. Sometimes life's going to throw things at you that you're not prepared for. But that doesn't mean you get to change the rules midway. You don't get to change the way you look at it. Like, I think that sometimes people say, well, I was against surrogacy until I knew an infertile couple. I was against abortion until I met a young mother who couldn't afford another child. I was against. So, yeah, they were against whatever it is until they saw someone who was in a difficult situation. Well, difficult situations don't change what you know to be true. Difficult situations don't change God's plans for us. So, I mean, I hope I was clear on my point there.
No, I 100% agree. It's kind of like what we talked about on the very first episode um, about abortion. Circumstances do not dictate what is and is not moral, right? But like I said, I've known people that Matter of fact, there's a couple that usually sits, I want to say, one or two rows in front of me at mass, and they have, I believe, two children of their own, but they've also adopted another two. And when I see these people that are unfortunately dealt a terrible hand, where they're infertile or they're unable to conceive of their own, and they want to opt in for surrogacy before adoption, I can't help but think of those two little boys that have been adopted by that couple that sits by me in mass, and see how happy they are and see how wonderful their lives are, and what the contrary to that could be, right? And again, you are born infertile, you are subjected to a disaster that makes it to where you cannot conceive, because it's within God's plan for you. Trying to circumvent that is saying that you know better than God. It's no different than the people that want to go in and take hormone therapy and have operations to, you know, go from man to woman or woman to man. You were made as what you are. And you trying to correct that is essentially trying to correct God, saying that he somehow made a mistake. And it's not. But if you think about it from just a compassionate perspective, if you can't have kids, but you want a family and you're capable of rearing and taking care of children, why would you not make another child that's already out there living in the system, whether it's the state or nation or whatever, wherever it is you live, and not make their life better by giving them a loving home, by giving them loving parents? It almost seems selfish. I want one of mine. Well, you're taking care of that child. You're adopting that child. They're yours. It's not, I would rather let this child stay in the system or in foster care or wherever, so that I can have my own kid, because it's what I want, not the path that God has laid before me that I'm supposed to accept, whether it's hard or not, but I want it. And so it does become selfish.
It does. I actually know a couple who found themselves in that situation. They couldn't have children of their own. They decided, after this many discussions, visits to the priest, prayer, they decided to adopt two brothers who were actually, because of their age, their situation, were kind of considered to be unadoptable. And this couple said, no, they're not. There's no child that's unadoptable. There's no child that's unlovable. And they adopted these two brothers. And I guess it was about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, that I actually did some of the readings at the confirmation of these two young men. And it was just a beautiful experience. And knowing the parents and knowing these young boys and getting to know them, uh, there was there was certainly not less love than there would have been if they were their biological children. As far as this couple was concerned, these are their sons. As far as these sons are concerned, these are their parents. And I was just very blessed to be a part of their being brought into the family of the church. So yeah, yeah. Again, life throws you some curveballs. That is without a doubt. But we don't get to make the rules as far as what we do to respond to those curveballs. We've got to play by the rules that are set before us, and those rules are set by God. And just like you mentioned, that about taking hormones and things like that, and having surgeries done to change. You can't say change your gender because that's an impossibility, but You know, you're thumbing your nose at God. You screwed up, God. I'm going to correct your mistake. I mean, think about the what a bold statement that is. A false statement too, but of course, like what a bold statement. You screwed up, God. It's up to me and the doctors to correct your massive mistake. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's the same uh kind of justification that people make. Yeah, but I always wanted to be a dad. I always wanted to be a mom. It's not the same as da, 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 right? It's kind of the same justification that people make when it comes to the church, not being willing to budge on these kinds of moral teachings, right? And what's funny, over the entire 2000 plus year history of the Catholic Church, doctrine has never, ever been changed. It has been expanded upon, it has been better explained, it's been uh, clarified, but it's never been changed. And when non-Catholics and even some Catholics uh, see the direction in which society has gone with moral ambiguity. They think that morality is objective. Um, they make the same argument that the church should be evolving with the times. But if the times are moving in the wrong direction and the church moved with it, then the church would be moving in the wrong direction. And that's not something that can ever happen. Christ said it himself that the powers of hell shall not prevail against it. And there's nothing that there's nothing about moral relativism that is not of hell, right? What's immoral is immoral no matter which way you see it. The church does have to be immovable because Christ isn't, sitting up there going, yeah, I get it. It's more popular now. People want that. Eh, you know, like, you you know, the church is not a democracy. And we've said that before, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around why it's so important that the church changes its teachings so that people who have no intention of joining the church can feel better about what people they're never going to join, never going to agree with, believe in. You know what I'm saying? It's like if let's say that like the Church of Latter-day Saints. I've got friends who are Mormons, they're great people.
Mhm,
I'm never going to join
mhm.
I'm never going to join the Mormon Church. Whatever the Mormon Church believes about Catholicism doesn't affect me because I don't know what they believe. I don't. I haven't dug deep enough into it. I've got friends, like I said, who are Mormons, but I don't know what their whatever are. But it's like me saying I need Ed to change his opinion of my belief that abortion is wrong in all cases. If I'm never ever going to be friends with Ed anyway, like I'm never going to come to Ed's side, but I still need him to come to mine. To me, that's kind of like this deep rooted psychological need for validation, like external validation, right? People they need the church to change its opinions so they feel better about themselves, even though they don't believe in anything the church teaches.
Yeah. Well, I think that whether you're a member of the Catholic Church or not, I think that people do look at it and they realize that's over a billion people. I think that people realize that the Catholic Church is faith wise the big boy on the block, and because you will see people who are not Catholic, and when they misunderstand something that Francis says, they will jump right on it and say, "Oh, look, the church now says this is okay. The church now says that's okay." And I would say, "Well, why do you care if you're not Catholic?" But let's say, but they do realize that it's a big voice and it carries a lot of weight, and so they would like, even if you're not a Catholic, they would like us, the Catholic Church, to change its teaching on a lot of things because they see that as almost like a clout kind of a thing, or a validation of something that they or their church has been teaching or promoting. Um, so, I mean, yeah, there are. Listen, we all like people to agree with us. It's just our part of our human nature. And who do you want in our personal lives? Who do we want to agree with us? The popular people, the people that other people look up to. We want those people to agree with us. So, as I'm saying, so even if you are a member of some other faith, you'd love to hear the Catholic Church agree with you because it's a big voice, and it's if they agree with you, then you do look at that as something you strive for, that you want it. If you look at both on social media, and you see it all the time, is that people who have no vested interest in the Catholic Church will complain the loudest about the Catholic Church on social media. And like you were mentioning, like, why would you care? Why do you care what the church is teaching if you have no thought of ever joining the church? Well, it's because you'd still like the big kid on the block to agree with you, whether or not you ever plan on being friends with that kid. And whereas, like when I see on like Twitter and things like that, I rarely see a Catholic picking a particular other denomination or another religion entirely and saying, well, here's why I so badly dislike this particular religion or faith or whatever. I don't see that all the time. I see Catholics defending the Catholic faith, and I see other people attacking the Catholic faith. But I think it's just because you either want the big boy on the block to agree with you, or if they're not going to agree with you, you want to take him down. You want to knock him off the top of the hill. So that would be my thought on that. It's just that you don't need to have a desire to be Catholic to want the Catholic Church to agree with what you have to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. But going back to what you said about whenever anybody sees something that was said by Pope Francis or anyone remotely associated with the Vatican says anything, the media loves to run with it. And I never paid attention to anything involving the church whatsoever. Uh, Outside of, oh, the Pope retired. Oh, it's so sad the Pope passed. That kind of thing. Oh, we got a new Pope. Just stuff like that. But what I have noticed is that it doesn't matter if it's the hot dog vendor who sells his wares in St. Peter's Square outside the Vatican to tourists. It says, I don't agree with insert, I don't know. I don't agree with Marian devotion. The media will go, Vatican's hot dog vendor denounces Marian devotion. Well, it's just a guy. And it's just, but it's the same thing if there's a cardinal that comes across and says, I think we should do this. And then the media quotes him, and then they turn around and says, Vatican decides to change this. When it's not the case. It's one guy saying something that is a personal opinion of his, which may or may not fall under the realm of the magisterium. And if it doesn't, then your opinion is wrong, Monsignor. You know, your opinion is wrong. It's the same thing with uh Pope Francis. We talked about this on a few episodes ago. It might have even been Friday. I don't remember. But, you know, papal infallibility falls to when he's speaking in ex cathedra, when he is speaking strictly on uh, church doctrine, right? So if Pope Francis were to hypothetically say, I don't think we should do this or we should do that, the media immediately runs a headline, which we all know that headlines never tell the entire story. And even if they do tell the entire story of what was said and done, they never include the proper context because they want clicks. They want people talking about it in their comments so they can get more web traffic and whatever. They'll run with it and say the Pope has officially denounced da 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 da, or the Pope has officially changed the church's teaching on da da da. No, no, he didn't. I mean, I don't think you guys understand what promulgation is. You don't understand what papal bulls or papal briefs now, whatever they're called now, are. I don't think you understand the entire process that would have to be done in order to officially change the church's teaching on something. It's not like he can go through and update the Notion page and be like, all right, this is new. Now it requires a lot of promulgation, a lot of one of those guys that do it's the same process as like if you're going to try to verify a miracle in a canonization process. You've got postulators, and their whole job is to spend 2 decades trying to prove that the miracle didn't happen, right? And so, you know, I I've got my fingers crossed for Fulton Sheen and Benedict XVI. I would love to see them canonized, but there are people that are in direct employment, answerable only to the highest levels of the church hierarchy, whose job it is to disprove any miracles ever happened. They spend decades trying to prove that it didn't happen. And then when they can't come up with any scientific explanation, and the reason it took decades is because of scientific advancement and possibilities, they go, all right, we cannot by any earthly means explain this. It has to be a miracle. The miracle is the last option. And if it takes them that long, if it takes them decades to validate a miracle in the church, just so that there's not one guy popping up every 20 minutes, it's a miracle. How long of a process do you think it's going to take to change a 2,000 plus year old doctrine? It Pope Francis could try to change something today. We would be two popes away before it actually changed.
Yeah, I don't think people, like you're saying, people don't fully understand the way things work in the church. Some people are bright enough to know that the church moves slowly, but I don't think they understand the reason why it moves slowly. And like you're
But the
saying, is
church
that
moves in centuries, not in days.
exactly right? But I think that people are they love this idea, and this is why, and right or wrong, this is why the media and so many other people love Francis, because they almost feel like he is moving the church towards a more secular view of the world, which is not the case. But that's what they see, and that's what they're hopeful of. That he's going to align certain church teachings with what the rest of the world thinks and feels today. And we see it. You see it in some of the other mainstream or the mainline Protestant churches where they are making wholesale changes in a pretty quick manner. Um, and then they say, okay, well, if other churches can do that, so the Catholic Church can do that as well. No, they can't. And this is one of the reasons why I'm Catholic, and I'm sure it's one of the reasons why you're Catholic. That we're not, we don't have to wake up every day and flip through the internet and see, okay, what are they teaching differently today? It's just not going to happen. I mean, honestly, I'm an old dude. I can't think of a single teaching of the church that has changed in my lifetime. There are things that have been clarified in my lifetime, but nothing has changed from day one, and I don't expect that it ever will. I mean, we that goes back to where we started this conversation with relativism. The relativism is not a good thing. I don't know why some people think it is. It's not relative morality
It's my
is a
truth,
danger.
Ed.
Uh, well, yeah, well, other than you, Jeff, because I trust your truth, but but uh, but that's the thing. I mean, what a dangerous concept that my morals are my morals, yours are yours, my truth is my truth, yours is yours. Um, I can believe A, you can believe B. We've gotten to the point where I think that we're gonna, in a few years, if a kid puts 1 plus 1 equals 7 on a test paper, that the teacher's not going to be allowed to mark it wrong because, well, that's that child's truth. I mean, we're really pushing the envelope, I think, with this with relativism, um, and it's taken us down a really dark path. I will say that. You may not like some truths. You may listen. There are things that are true about me that I wish weren't, but I have to live with the fact that they are. You know, um, you know, I wish I looked like Brad Pitt, but I don't. I'm not going to say, well, Jeff, you must agree that I look like Brad Pitt, and everyone else must agree to it because that's my truth. I look at we're twins. You can't separate us. Um, but that's not the truth. No matter how badly I want it. So this is the danger with relativism. This is the danger of having your own truth, your own morality, is that you wind up not only sharing untruths with other people, but you get yourself and others to eventually believe these things. And that's when things get really scary.
Yeah, I wish I was taller than I am. What's funny is everybody I've ever met online and then go on to meet in person, when they get there to shake my hand, they're like, "Oh," and they realize I'm 5'6". They go, "I thought you were 6 foot." I was like, I tell everyone I'm 6 foot, just like a dating app, and then when we meet, I'm like, "I don't know, it was my big brother." But no, I mean, I get it. I- as much as I
Facts.
want to be 6 foot tall, it doesn't matter. As much as I don't want the truth to be this because it inconveniences my life, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it inconveniences me. The truth is not objective. Truth is truth. There's not versions of the truth. That's something that litigators can spell out in a courtroom when they're trying to get their client a good deal. That's not what reality is based off of. But you know, I think I'm just getting meaner or grumpier as I get older. And I look at you and I'm like, Ed is always happy. Ed is always in a good mood. Ed is like every time I see him, he's like, "Oh, I'm happy go lucky. It's a great day." And I feel like I'm turning into Clint Eastwood in what was it, Gran Torino, where he's just like
Uh,
pointing guns at people, get off my lawn.
yeah.
That's how I feel sometimes when I see some of these takes, especially online. And I wish I didn't have to see it as much as I do, but like somebody said, I'm a social media personality now. So, um, I wish I didn't have to see some of these takes. But when I see these takes and then I see someone else, not me, provide them with the easiest to follow chain of evidence that proves the contrary to what they were saying. And
Mm,
then they turn around and they say, no, that's not true because this wasn't said. Like I saw someone explaining yesterday or the day before. It might have gone on for 2 days. Um, to this woman that the Catholic Church. was the first church that was, founded by Christ. And she's like, well, the word Catholic is never mentioned in the Bible. The word Catholic is mentioned in the Bible quite often, but we translated it from Greek into English. Just like the New Testament was written in Greek, and there, in Greek, there are three different words for love. You have eros, which is romantic, spousal kind of love, right? You have philos, which is the brotherhood, friendship, sisterhood kind of love. And then you have Agrippa, which is 99% of the time translated to charity, right? So if you go through and you read the Bible in Greek, you'll see Eros, you'll see Philos, you'll see Agrippa. But if you read it in English, you just see love, 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 love. That's it. And people who don't understand how the word Catholicos, meaning of the whole or universal, was what was referred to when it came to Christ's church. Because before the word Christianity came around, what do you call the followers of Christ? They were people of the way of Christ. And it wasn't until I believe it was like 107, Saint Ignatius, even though they try to give him credit for uh, coining the term Christian, it was used. The first time it was ever used was in Antioch. It may or may not have been Ignatius, but that's beside the point. Catholicos and Christianus meant universal followers of Christ. And that all gets boiled down. And like the understanding of etymology is important, right? That all boils down to Catholic Christians. That's what it boils down to. It is the first church, the one that was
Yeah.
founded by Christ. But they go, no, no, no. The word Catholic's not in the Bible. And I want to pull my hair out. I'm like, someone just explained that to you that it
Yeah.
is. But no, I read the Bible, and it's not
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
reading an English,
And it goes
like
back to, it was,
English sucks. English sucks as a language because if you learn any of the romantic language, if you learn
it's
Spanish, if you learn Italian, if you learn French, the words, there's like three different words for love, three different words for happiness, because each word has a substance, a deeper meaning attached to it. Where in the house, in America, we're just like, it's a word. You can infer what we mean by it depending on the context in which it's spoken, which is why I've gotten even more and more involved in learning Latin because it doesn't leave room for interpretation. Each word means what it means, and there's no possible deviations to it. But when you
yeah.
explain, it's like they think the Bible was sent via telefax to King James, and it was recorded that Christ spoke in ye old English, and that it's like, come on.
Well, yeah, and you would come back to some of these arguments where saying that Saint Ignatius, in his letter to the Smyrnians in 110 A.D., used the word Catholic, and they would say, "Oh, well, that was 110, so that was not during the time of Christ, and it was not when the Gospels were being written." I'm saying, well, but you're using arguments that were written, 12 years ago by Pastor Bob. So you can't say that something that was said in 110 is not legitimate based on something that somebody told you in 2023. That part of it I don't understand, but this is the issue that we run into all the time with these arguments when there are so many problems with first of all, personal interpretation of the Bible, which is never a good thing, and then the fact that people don't realize that we have sacred scripture and we have sacred tradition. and you don't have one without the other. In fact, we wouldn't have the Gospels if it wasn't for sacred tradition. How did these Gospels stay alive for those first 10, 15, 20 years after Christ rose and ascended? You know, there wasn't an on the scene reporter. There wasn't a guy, with the what are those hats called? Those really cool hats from like the 40s and 50s, and the guy
A
standing under
fedora,
the cross. What's that?
a fedora.
A fedora, right? Thank you. There wasn't a guy with a fedora and a wool jacket on, standing underneath the cross, writing everything down. You know, um, but but yet we know it to be true because of the tradition that when it until it was eventually written down. But so that every time someone starts an argument with me with, well, show me that in the Bible, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. This is not gonna go well. But then but then you can show them, okay, well, here's something from the Bible that explains to that what I'm saying does not contradict the Bible. But that's never good enough. It has to be, well, it's written. And then people will use there's some of the arguments that are used that are kind of all as a Catholic, you would respond, well, show me where the word Trinity is in the Bible. And yet you believe that. And they'll say, well, but it's implied by what you've read. Well, okay. Well, how come what I'm telling you can't be inferred or implied by what you're reading in there? It's the same thing. Like, when you have arguments about John chapter 6 about the Eucharist and things like that. Is it symbolic? Is it not symbolic? And things like that. You can go on and on and on. But again, I think that you know personal interpretation has just created such havoc within the Christian church, and this concept of, well, I mean, like we just say it's sola scriptura. I mean, it just has caused so many issues within the Christian church.
Yeah,
Um,
whenever I see people try to argue sola scriptura, and they're like, "Well, show me in the Bible where it is." If it's not in the Bible, it doesn't exist. I'm like, sadly, Canada is not in the Bible, and as much as I don't want it to, it still exists. All right.
right. Yeah.
What was
No,
it at
no,
the end
you're
of
absolutely right.
at the end of the Gospel of John? There were many other things that Christ did and taught all of us, but there is not enough room to have it all written down.
Yes. And
Okay,
then
so I
also,
guess all other things just don't matter. How did those other things get known? Because the people that walked with Christ, the people that spent time with Christ, that ministered alongside Christ, told it to the people that followed them, and they told it to the people that followed them, and it got passed down until the compilation of the Bible took place, where all of the church doctrine was compiled based off of the tradition, oral, sacred tradition was passed down. It's why it said, what was it? Peter said in Thessalonians, keep to what I have taught you and to the traditions of men. Why else would that be there?
yeah, yeah, and there's a reason why the statement you had made from the end of John is in there, and then you look at the last statement in Matthew with the Great Commission, and Christ, when he tells them to go out and baptize all nations, he also says, "Teach them all that I have commanded you." He doesn't say teach them only these few chapters of things that are eventually going to be written down. He says, "Teach them all that I have commanded you." So you put all of that together, and you realize that, yeah, there is the Gospels are wonderful. They are beautiful. They are certainly to be held in esteem. But we have more than that. People say it all the time. As Catholics, we use it as an argument. We say Christ didn't leave us a book; He left us a church. And you talk about apostolic succession. I think people don't realize the importance of that, of the apostles being the first bishops and then appointing other bishops, and it goes on down the line. You can't come onto the scene in 2024, like me, I have no delusion or illusion that I can, by myself, uh, just flip through the Bible and say, okay, I've got this. I understand it. I can come to me and I will explain to you everything that the Bible teaches us. I can't do that. I don't have that authority. Um, and that's what gets me crazy is that there are people who will feel like, okay, I'm the one. I'm the guy that figured it all out. I'm gonna get the empty deli on the street. It's been closed for 3 years. I'm gonna open that up next Sunday. I'm gonna have Ed's Church of Jesus Christ, and everyone's gonna come there, and they're gonna be amazed at how I've got this all figured out. And I mean that takes great hubris, really, and such a lack of humility to think that yeah, you are the guy that figured it all out. No, this is why the church is so beautiful, right? We've got the apostolic succession. We've got the hierarchy in place. We've got um you can look back, you can take any priest and you can go back and back and back, look at who he was ordained by and look at who that priest was ordained by and who that priest was ordained by, and you go all the way back and you can take it back 2000 years. You can't do that with any of these other churches. It's basically some guy who maybe went to theology school and then just decides, okay, I see where others before me have made mistakes. I've straightened those mistakes out. So now in 2024, I can tell you exactly what Christ meant 2,000 years ago. And that's why, well, I mean, that's why we have the confusion that we have today. That's why we have all the arguments that we have on Twitter and Facebook and everything, because there's
Yeah, it
so
happened to
many.
me. It happened to me like 2 days ago. I said something. A Protestant individual came in the comments, agreed with what I said. I'm not sure what denomination Protestant they were, but they agreed with what I said, and we were having a very cordial conversation. And then another Protestant came in who had a completely separate set of beliefs, and me and this individual could no longer have a conversation. The Protestants started arguing with each other, and I'm just like, okay, I'll just go make me some more tea. I might, go take my dog out now. Because they just started arguing with each other because they don't even believe in the same things across the board. It's no different than you have the global Methodist Church and you have the United Methodist Church. Even they had a schism. And look, the Catholic Church is no different when it comes to schism. We've got the great split between our Orthodox brothers, ourselves, and then there's the different rites. You've got the Roman Rite, the Byzantine Rite, the Eastern Rite. I get it. There are going to be some details that people are going to interpret differently. And we're going to do that all because we're human, right? But what I love about the Orthodox Church and all of the other uh, rites of Catholicism is all of the doctrine is 100% agreed upon. It's all agreed upon. The implementation of it or the falling under the umbrella of Rome is obviously not agreed upon. You know, Eastern Orthodox, we had two popes. We had one in Constantinople, we had one in Rome, and when it was time to merge them together, the guy in Istanbul said, or excuse me, Constantinople, now Istanbul went, nah, why should I over here fall under this guy? Why can't he fall under me? And it was that human element, and we end up with the schism in the church. But the doctrine was never changed. The doctrine remained agreed upon. They just don't like one guy didn't want to report to the other guy. And that was essentially obviously there's more detail to it than that. But because we're like 5 minutes left in the show and we haven't done Saint of the Day yet, very simplified, generalized version is one guy didn't want to report to the other because he didn't think that it was possible to govern the way that he governed the church from his place in Constantinople when the guy's all the way over here in Rome. and vice versa. That's why I had to go back the other way. And Ed, your microphone cut out for some reason.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. I
So
think I bumped
there
into
you
the
go.
mute thing. But as you well know, I'm Byzantine Catholic, and if I've been to Orthodox liturgies, and other than during the invocations, they leave out the part about the Pope. It's an identical. They use the liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom like we do. They use the liturgy of Saint Basil the Great, and then but on most Sundays I attend what I would call right, or people just say most the right that most Roman Catholics belong to. And while the liturgy is somewhat different than what I was used to as a kid, the theology is all the same. There's no argument. I'm not hearing anything in the Byzantine Church or the Latin Rite Church that are contradictory. So yeah, so I mean, to your point, okay, maybe the Orthodox had an issue with the papacy, and that's kind of a big thing, but the theology otherwise is the same. So there you go. Let's get on to that. Those actually saints of the day.
There is saints, but we only have time for one because we're 4 minutes away and I don't want to run over. Saint John the Evangelist before the Latin Gate. And I love St. John the Evangelist before the Latin Gate. And I actually wanted to go from this and into talking about the Salus Populi Romani, which is the Marian icon, a Byzantine Marian icon, which I'm sure you are very familiar with, that is in St. Mary Major's in Rome. And I wanted to go down the rabbit hole. We'll do it tomorrow because there's a rabbit hole legend that was actually painted by St. Luke, the evangelist, and then brought by St. Helena in the 4th century to Rome. But we'll go down that rabbit hole tomorrow. For today, we're talking about St.
Yeah.
John the Evangelist before the Latin Gate. Um, Year 95, St. John the Evangelist was the only surviving apostle who was governing all of the churches in Asia Minor, which is present day Turkey. And he was apprehended at Ephesus and then sent in chains to Rome. The emperor Domitian did not relent at the sight of this venerable old man and condemned him to be cast into a cauldron of boiling oil. And the martyr doubtless heard with great joy this barbarous sentence. And it was one of the most cruel torments. And it seemed to light him up and make him agreeable because he wanted to be joined forever in unity with Christ, his Savior. But God accepted this will and crowned his desire, and he conferred on him the honor and merit of martyrdom while suspending the operation of the fire, just as he had formerly preserved the three children from injury in the Babylonian furnace. The seething oil was changed for him into an invigorating bath, and St. John the Evangelist came out more refreshed, feeling better than ever than when he had entered the cauldron. So that
Like he had
is
spent a day at the spa.
kind of, yeah, that's some bragging rights there. Oh, we're going to boil you alive. Bro got in there, washed his hair, came out, looking dapper and
Feeling good.
said, appreciate it. But we are
Good
rolling up
stuff.
on the last 60 seconds of the show because we're trying to keep this to an hour to make the listening a little more manageable for you guys. Otherwise, we could just keep going for hours. And we may do that when we bring on a guest. And I'm looking at a couple of guests I think would be awesome additions to the show. But if you do have any suggestions for guests that you would like us to talk to, leave them in the comments underneath uh, this video and we'll take a look.
Hey,
And Ed, it
hey
looked
Jeff,
like you were going to say something.
before you go on here, yeah, I'll just mention that you're talking about potential guests, and I have contacted a good friend of mine who it would be more than happy to be a guest, and I will just leave it at this. He's a Catholic, obviously, but he is also a rock and roll legend, a legend. I'm telling you, and he would be more than happy to join us sometime. So Keep that in mind.
We'll be back next week with Alice Cooper. Yeah, I'm kidding. I know Alice Cooper's a Christian. I don't think he's I don't think he's a Catholic though. I think he's an evangelist. Um, but you know
Yeah, I
what?
think
If I
so.
could get Alice Cooper on here, that'd be awesome. I'll do that too. But as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We're gonna tie this show up because we're not paid to go longer than an hour. If you want us to go more than that, send me money. I might share it with Ed, 60-40 split. But as
Appreciate it.
always, this episode is powered for free by Holy Habits. Make sure you go onto the App Store, or Google Play if you're looking for a habit tracker that you can build groups with people from your church, your family, keep each other accountable, and setting up daily prayer habits, daily rosary habits, holy hours, anything that helps you deepen your faith and get you closer to God. But that's it for today on the Catholic Convert Show. Thank you all for watching. Ed, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good, Jeff. Looking forward to it.
He's lying. He's not looking forward to it. But all of you beautiful listeners are. And I'll see you then.